Agape love is more than a fleeting emotion or a noble ideal. It is a way of life. It is not just one form of love among many. It is the highest form of love, rooted in divine selflessness and freely given to all. The word agape, comes from the ancient Greek denoting unconditional, self-sacrificing love. It is the love that does not count the cost, that gives without expecting return, and that seeks the good of the other simply because they are worthy of love. When we speak of agape as a way of life, we are not speaking of sentimentality. We are speaking of a radical transformation of how one views the world, others, and the self. To live a life of agape is to take on the very mind of Christ, who poured himself out for humanity not because they were worthy in themselves, but because love demanded it. Let us explore what it means to embrace agape as a way of life, spiritually, emotionally, practically, and communally. Agape is most vividly embodied in God himself. In Christian theology, God is love, Deus caritas est, not merely loving, not one who loves, but love in essence. This foundational understanding reorients the human approach to love. Agape is not earned, it flows from the lover regardless of the beloved's merit. This distinguishes it from eros, romantic desire, philia, friendship, and storge, familial love. Agape is freely willed, deliberate, and sacrificial. In the Gospel of John, we read, "Greater love has no one than this, that he lay down his life for his friends," John 15, verse 13. But Christ did not stop at friends. He laid down his life for enemies, strangers, and betrayers. This is the paradox and beauty of agape. It expands the circle of belonging to include everyone. To live agape is not simply to perform good deeds. It is to cultivate an inner disposition that seeks the good of others in all things, even at personal cost. Agape is the decision to value another's life and dignity, regardless of how we feel toward them in a given moment. This means patience when others are slow to understand, mercy when others fail, compassion when others suffer, truthfulness when lies might be easier, humility when ego urges triumph. The inner life of agape must be deeply rooted in self-awareness, prayer, and grace. One cannot give what one does not possess. Agape flourishes in a heart that has been softened, purified, and illumined. It grows in silence, in service, and in surrender to something greater than the self. Agape manifests in the ordinary. It is not limited to grand gestures or martyrdom. In fact, its truest form is often hidden in small, unseen acts. Listening attentively when someone is speaking, helping a coworker who has failed without condescension, choosing to forgive even when the offense stings, carrying burdens that are not yours simply to relieve another, speaking kindly of someone who cannot repay the favor. Mother Teresa often spoke of doing small things with great love. This is agape in action. It is not measured by applause or recognition, but by the measure of one's heart. Agape thrives when the ego is quiet and the soul is alive to the needs of others. Agape redefines how we approach all relationships. In friendship, it resists possessiveness and competition. In family, it transcends duty and obligation. In marriage, it deepens romance with a sacred commitment. In communities, it binds together people of differing views and backgrounds. In romantic love, agape guards against lust, manipulation, and self-interest. It seeks the flourishing of the beloved, even if it means personal sacrifice. In parenting, agape expresses itself not only in affection, but in the long patience of guiding a child toward maturity. Through discipline, encouragement, and relentless love. In friendships, agape encourages honesty, loyalty, and the willingness to walk with someone through both joy and sorrow, even when the cost is high. In enmity, agape blesses those who curse, prays for those who persecute, and refuses to mirror hatred with hatred. A key but often neglected aspect of agape is love for oneself, not in vanity but in dignity. We are not called to self-erasure. Agape demands the care of one's own soul, body, and calling. One cannot pour from an empty vessel. Living agape includes setting boundaries that protect what is holy in you, rejecting self-loathing in favor of gentle honesty, embracing one's identity as beloved, not for utility but for being, engaging in rest, healing, and renewal, not as indulgence but as preparation for service. To love others well, we must live out of the truth that we are also loved. This does not mean we demand others to love us first, but that we recognize God's love as our source and foundation. Agape is revolutionary in its implications for social life. It changes how we view systems, institutions, and policies. A society rooted in agape is one where the poor are not forgotten, the sick are cared for, the prisoner is visited, the immigrant is welcomed, the enemy is humanized. Agape demands justice, not vengeance. It seeks structures that affirm dignity, not exploit weakness. It is neither sentimental nor passive. It is courageous and resilient. It speaks truth to power, not out of hatred, but from a desire to restore what is broken. The greatest test of agape is how it responds to suffering, betrayal, and injustice. It does not turn a blind eye, it does not excuse harm, but it also refuses to become embittered. It meets evil with unwavering courage and redemptive compassion. Agape means forgiving those who do not apologize, praying for those who inflict pain, standing firm against oppression without hatred, giving voice to the voiceless with integrity. Agape is what allows a wounded soul to say, "I will not become like those who harmed me." It is the quiet miracle that overcomes darkness not by force, but by radiant mercy. Living agape is a lifelong journey. It is not mastered in a day, but formed through intentional choices, grace-filled failures, and persistent openness to love's demands. To become a person of agape, pray daily for a heart of compassion. Read stories of saints, prophets, and ordinary people who loved radically. Practice acts of hidden kindness. Forgive often, even when it feels impossible. Confess where your love has grown cold and ask to begin again. Agape is both a gift and a practice. It is bestowed by grace and cultivated by discipline. It is not always emotionally satisfying, but it is always spiritually fruitful. A life rooted in agape bears unmistakable fruit, peace that does not depend on circumstances, joy that springs from communion rather than achievement, freedom from the slavery of ego and resentment, wisdom born from seeing the world through the eyes of love, resilience to face suffering with courage and meaning. Agape transforms not only relationships but entire communities. It creates homes where children flourish, workplaces where dignity reigns, and neighborhoods where trust is restored. It disarms hostility. It builds bridges. It resurrects what was dead. In today's fragmented, polarized, and often indifferent world, agape is desperately needed. It is a countercultural stance that refuses to dehumanize, dismiss, or despair. It builds slow, lasting connections in a world obsessed with speed and performance. Agape listens where others shout. It remembers the forgotten. It welcomes the outsider. It remains faithful when others flee. It loves not because the world is lovable, but because love is who we are called to be. To live agape today is to engage with difficult people without withdrawing your humanity. Uphold your principles without losing kindness. Stand for truth without losing love. Choose silence over slander. Choose mercy over retaliation. Agape is not simply something we do, it is something we become. A person who lives agape becomes a shelter for others, a light in darkness, a signpost pointing toward heaven. To live agape is to say with your life, "I see you, you matter, you are loved." And perhaps most powerfully, even if you never love me in return, I will still choose love. This is not weakness, it is divine strength. It is the echo of the eternal love that made the world, sustained the cross, and still lives in the hearts of those who believe in goodness. Agape is not a theory, not a strategy, not a tactic. It is a way of life, the only way worth living, and the only love that truly lasts.